fortunately in Army North. I'd love to talk a little bit about Army North, since that's the organization. This is my second time in this organization. We do homeland missions and at the Title 10 level. So a lot of responses that you see, for example, here in Texas, we had those devastating floods, so tragic. The response that you see there is the Texas, the state emergency system, and the aircraft that you see flying is Texas Guard. The Texas National Guard is very big and very capable, and they're doing that. But occasionally you'll get a problem so extreme that you'll have natural disasters that you have to work, for example, hurricanes, where they actually do need some active duty to also help. A lot of times it's just not enough rotary wing, even in a big organization, to have all the aircraft out that you want to have out. So we have, we were able to do...
Hi, let's welcome Major General Niave F. Knell, Deputy Commanding General for Operations at U.S. Army North, overseeing Homeland Defense and Civil Support Missions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate your outreach to say, let's bring the civilian and the military together, have discussions, and see what we have in common, which of course is enormous, because we come from the civilian part before we go into the military. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let you share your story in your own words. I covered a very high level stuff, but maybe you can go deeper into that and then share your story.
Sure. I'm originally from Milford, Massachusetts. I'm a first-generation American, proud of that. My parents immigrated from Ireland in 1965. So I think that gives us a different lens. Anyone that's a first-generation American kind of looks on this country with new eyes and sees opportunities and many different things. I was fortunate enough to go to West Point for college and was commissioned from there. And since then, it's been so far a 33-year adventure with the United States Army. Served with some wonderful people in many different locations, was lucky enough to go to Germany and serve over there for 3.5 years, and then have been in the United States since then, and married along the way, had kids that now have lived East Coast, West Coast, the Midwest, and actually right now we're all here in Texas. My youngest is home from college. Just a kind of an American journey is the way I would put it. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. Learned a lot along the way and very interested in having a good discussion with you.
Absolutely. Well, we can jump right into that. And one of the topics I like to talk about with my guests, and I had a lot of different people in the military, not in the military. And when it comes to the U.S. Army, I had people from NCOs to general officers like you. And I love to explore leadership principles and maybe a philosophy that a person follows. So do you have a certain blueprint on how to be a great leader, and did it evolve over time for you?
Well, thanks, Danny. I would never call myself a great leader. I think everybody's always a leader in training. I don't think you ever have that at a level where you'd call yourself an expert. But I think a couple of things I've followed throughout and probably learned throughout my career. I don't think I started with this perspective, but kind of the first one was always seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I really learned that in Iraq. We had a time when, for example, I would say, we had a time when we thought, let's apply what we would normally do. We were short some police in one area of Baghdad, and we had extra in another area of Baghdad. And we said, well, let's do what we would do in normal policing. My background is military police. We would shift resources accordingly where you need them, and sometimes the resources are people. And we shifted police officers to different locations, and without realizing they would be very much in danger. And were hunted down, and a couple of them were killed because we moved them to a different location where they were immediately recognized as not being from that area, different family, different tribe. So a lot of times you think you understand the situation that you're in, but you really, really don't, without kind of really understanding, what is the situation? What's the environment? What's the people's perspective? Without knowing all of those things, you don't always make the best decisions. And in that case, we were applying kind of a Western model of this would work in the United States, it would work there, and it didn't. And even working with individuals, that helped. That motto, seek first to understand and then to be understood, it could be used in a tactical situation, it could be used with people, it can be used in any type of environment. If you don't understand your situation, what is happening, what's going on in the tactical world, you'd be in trouble. but also when dealing with people. If you don't understand their perspective, their background, how they grew up. We did a lot of work with foreign police. So just trying to understand, like, how is their model of policing different than our model of policing? How do they interact with people? Without kind of that understanding, you see things like, why can't we just do this? Because that's what you would do at home. And that totally doesn't work in different situations. So I think that that's been really helpful. I think also always having humility to realize you're going to learn from other people just helps you immensely. And to think, I had a boss that used to say, he was not my boss, he was my boss's boss. He used to say, never consider yourself an expert, because you're going to think you're never, if you think you're an expert, you're not going to read books anymore, you're not going to talk to people anymore, you're going to think you have all the answers. He said you could never consider yourself an expert, which I thought was fantastic advice. Really, just always be humble, always see what you can learn from other people, because there's an immense amount to be learned. The more you talk to people, you don't know.
Yeah, and I like what you said about understanding the situation, assessing the environment, because I see this in the civilian world and frankly in my own life, where I know that I don't understand something, but sometimes human bias or emotions, you're afraid, I am afraid to learn something that I think is not true, or just, in a situation where I already believe I know this, but it's different. And then understanding the situation and learning despite your own ego seems to be very important. And that's why I love to talk to people like you, who served in the U.S. military, especially general officers who know how this works. Maybe from the emotional standpoint, did you ever have troubles with where your own emotions were in the way of doing something that's necessary, so you had to learn to act in spite of your own feelings? Did you ever face that?
I think everyone faces, of course, periods of time where you're either frustrated, angry, or stressed, and I would say I think probably stressed is the one everybody feels day to day. Am I going to get this right for work? I'm sure you feel it, in your job. Is this going to be right? Is my boss going to be happy? Am I balancing all my responsibilities? Do I have enough time with my family? I think a lot of us feel stressed just every day. I think that's one that over time, learning to manage that is really, really helpful. We've had classes in the military where they bring in, meditation, learn how to like calm your breathing, calm yourself. There's lots of different, very popular kind of running through the military, probably for the last 5 to 10 years, is Stoicism, reading from the Stoics, understanding how to say, to me, it would be serenity prayer. Things I can control, things I can't control. I've got to let go of the things I can't control, but control the things that I can. I think probably the most thing that military people is stress.
And then I've also heard that training, especially in the army, is very important to deal with uncertainty, because you probably already faced a lot of those scenarios in your training. So when you're in the situation, you already know what to do despite how you feel in the moment, right?
Yes, I mean, the training gives you experience. If you can do training over and over and over again, and then you see a situation similar, you're like, I'm going to do what I did in training. That's I know I already know how to approach it. I at least know the start. I know that I need to start this way, and then I can back it up with some experience in training that'll get me through enough to be able to take the first good action. And then at least go from there. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about leadership and leadership development, because not only U.S. Army aspires to lead their people, but also develop a new generation of leaders. Do you have your perspective on how to inspire and train this new generation of leaders?
Yeah, well, first I'd say we're incredibly fortunate in the military that the military is willing to invest in us too. As we're going through our careers, we go to schools, 6 months. We go to school for a year when we first become majors, and then we go to school for a year again when we first become colonels. So there's a lot of places that wouldn't invest that much in making sure that their people are developed themselves. But then also part of that is teaching you how do you develop other people. So we have a mentorship program now for within my branch for people who are going into battalion command, and so I have two people that I'm working with before they go to battalion command. And my first thing stressed was the most important thing as you get senior is patience, because a lot of times you've already seen the problems you're going to see, and you could immediately solve the problem. But what you're trying to do is teach people to be you in the future, and you got to let them kind of wrestle with it a little bit. Of course, not in a crisis. Of course, in a crisis, you're gonna solve the problem. But in anything that's not a crisis, let them bring you a solution. Let them work through it. And if you're a list person and you like to have a to-do list and cross things off, it's really hard because you want to just cross it off. You want to say it's done, but you actually have to give the people, time to work that, the people that work for you. And pretty soon you'll see that you've developed people that are like, here's the problem. Here's, maybe what the regulation says, or here tactically is what we should do. Here's some options. You'll really develop them to be able to bring you, solutions versus you telling them what to do all the time. But it takes a lot of patience when you're senior to be able to train people to be able to do that, and then give them some experience and back off and say, here's, you want to bounce some ideas off me, I'll give you some input, but I want you to experience this in the way that you have planned it, so that you can come back with your own introspective insights into, maybe I could have done this. We'll talk about it afterwards. Maybe something could have gone differently, or what are you going to do next time? But like a lot of when you get senior is mentoring and talking to people through, like, how do you want to think through this problem? How do you think you should approach it? Okay, try it. And then come back and say, what do you think could have been done differently?
And speaking about mentorship, I know that this is a very big part of many people's journeys, probably including yours. Was there a person or people who mentored you who had a significant impact on you personally?
Oh, of course. I mean, from your first battalion commander and company commander on. So one of my classmates, Everett Spain, he's over at West Point. He did a big study on how impactful your first battalion commander is to whether you stay in the Army or decide after maybe 5 or 7 years that it's not for you. And, I was fortunate to have great battalion commanders from my early years, people that I thought, good people, they make good decisions, they have good families. Maybe this is the kind of life that I want to have. So that was from Michael Lansing to Ted Spain. And then later in my career, when I branched off into a bit of operations and a little bit away from military police, of course, people who believed that I could do a job that wasn't normally done by a military police officer like Jeff Buchanan. I've been fortunate all around. I've really never had a boss that I didn't learn something from. And maybe it was a little bit about myself and how I might approach that differently. But they had an approach that also made them successful, and I learned things from that too, even if it wasn't my way. I think that the great thing about the Army is you get exposed to new leaders every year, every 2 years, and you just get to see how different people approach problems, and that there are many ways to approach a problem and to be successful as being a commander, or to solve whatever problems at hand, just from different perspectives and different approaches.
And how do you approach mentoring other people, whether it's young officers or someone else? Do you have some kind of a framework that you like to follow, or maybe some specific approach that you like to take when it comes to mentoring other people?
I like to first kind of get an assessment of that person. Like, let's see where they are. What have they learned so far in their career? What's their experience? What's their background? And then what are they about to go into? Where could they identify some areas? And a lot of times people will identify their own weaknesses and where they think I'm really, or they'll say, I'm worried about how I'm going to be able to communicate as I move from a unit of 120 people to a unit of 500 people. How do I make sure that what I want to see my command philosophy still is spread throughout that organization? So they might identify something, or we might go through, like, yes, you have a certain weakness, but at this point, the amount of effort that you would put into making that weakness, average, probably not worth it. Maybe best to play to your strengths. But then you have a command sergeant major. We're lucky that we have an enlisted senior enlisted person that's always right there with us. And you say, hey, this is my weak area. I really need you to watch that. This is the area that I'm not good. Or make sure someone on your team has that as a strength. You can build your teams and make sure that maybe a weak spot is fit in. So a lot of it is like almost in a specific approach to each person of, like, what's the strengths? Let's play on those. What's some weaknesses? Yeah, that one is worth working on. Or no, you could fill that in with another person and make yourself really well-rounded by your team.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing this. Going back to uncertainty and high stress environments. We already talked about what you said about stoicism, what you shared about training. Any other philosophies that you follow when it comes to dealing with uncertainty, high stakes environment situations when a lot of that is on the line, or does the stoicism philosophy cover
I think you also have to believe in the people around you. You know, it's nothing in the military is all on you. You always have a team, and you have to believe that they're going to do their job too. I got thrown into when we did the Operation Allies Welcome, which was the Afghan evacuation. I got pulled from my job as the commandant and sent to Camp Atterbury, and in very short notice, that went from being, oh, we might use this camp, we might not use this camp, to we're sending you a plane in 24 hours. And it was a mad scramble. And I got the people that were working that were going to help run the organization and help settle the people 24 hours before we got the plane. And as they arrived, it was a battalion commander, so a lieutenant colonel and his sergeant major. And I said, look, we don't have time. We're going to use the plan that the people on the ground here, thank God the Indiana National Guard was already there, and along with a training support battalion. And it kind of said, this is how we use this area when we mobilize units. Maybe use it the same way. I said, we don't have time to change that plan. We're going to do that. And we're just going to be at the best level we can be when the first unit arrives. And luck is an important thing in all of this too. That we looked around on that about 6 hours out and realized we didn't have an interpreter yet because they were shifting people around from different locations. At this time, I think there were already 4 locations set up, and of course they're trying to contract interpreters, and it's not like they're just waiting around. We looked at each other and said, okay, we're going to use hand and arm signals, you know. And I just said, you've got to trust that your leaders can do this, because here we are, right? No one else is going to do it for us. And we're really lucky. The first person that walked off the plane, our number 0001, spoke English. And that was, you know, like everybody's stress level just went down so much. But I had faith that was Chris Cook and Sergeant Major McIntyre. I had faith that they were going to do it even if we did hand and arm signals, you know, because they had good leaders under them that were company commanders. That was a good leadership team, and they were going to make that mission happen. So I think part of it is also belief in your team. Your team is going to make things happen.
And do you want to share any other stories of your service that taught you some important lessons? I understand that many of that you can share, maybe it's classified, but stuff that you are open to put out there, and maybe some stories or anecdotes that taught you some lessons that you still apply today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wrote about this on LinkedIn. I think the lesson number one from West Point was on the water, which is funny because it's a land school, it's an Army school, but I was on the crew team, and we had boat races to see who would get what seat on a boat, or if someone would earn a seat on the boat. And we had some people that when you put them on the rowing machine, if people are familiar with the concept two rower, you put them on the machine. We would do 2,000-meter sprints. That's the big test on a rowing machine. The people that would score the fastest on that machine didn't always win a seat on the boat, because when you put people together on a boat, everybody has to move together and pull the same. And when you do that, the boat sets. If the boat goes a little bit to either side, everybody's oar isn't pulling the same amount of water, and your boat won't go as far, so your team won't be as fast. So it's incredible to watch a person that is incredibly strong on a rowing machine that doesn't earn a seat on the boat because they don't work well with the team. I've taken that that's a lifelong lesson. That started from there. Is the first thing you do is you set the boat. So in almost every organization I've been in, I try to set the boat and make sure that everybody knows they're on the team. We're on the team together. And if there's one person pulling hard but they're setting the boat sideways, we're not going fast. We're just going. We're getting crushed by boats that all work together, but the people aren't even as strong. So let's all work together. Now, there's some people that say don't ever use a sports analogy, right, to when you're talking to people, and certainly don't use a sports analogy for a sport that most people haven't done. But that does seem to resonate with some people. So, I mean, throughout my career, starting in Germany, I found that if you found the right person to talk to and have a cup of coffee with them and have a conversation. You can use a German training area to train your platoon, even though Americans have never used that training area. That was just a conversation with a really friendly German civilian that ran that training area that let us use that training area. I mean, from that to, I would say, jumping into an organization, the Criminal Investigation Division, when I was a battalion commander, without having that kind of experience, military police officer, but not at the investigative level, and having a bunch of experts around that could do high level, felony level criminal investigations, and thinking, okay, I understand what this organization is about. This organization does felony level investigations, but how do I add to that as a leader when felony level investigations is not my area of expertise? What do I add to that? And working with an operations officer that had done investigations from, I don't even want to list probably a significant amount of murders, all the way to the Pat Tillman investigation and to what happened in his background. Just fantastic people that you say, okay, I can learn from them, but what can I do as a leader to make this environment more conducive to do more felony level investigations? Fortunately, in Army North, I'd love to talk a little bit about Army North, since that's the organization. This is my second time in this organization. We do homeland missions and at the Title 10 level. So a lot of responses that you see, for example, here in Texas, we had those devastating floods, so tragic. The response that you see there is Texas, the state emergency system, and the aircraft that you see flying is Texas Guard. The Texas National Guard is very big and very capable, and they're doing that. But occasionally you'll get a problem so extreme that you'll have natural disasters that you have to work, for example, hurricanes, where they actually do need some active duty to also help. A lot of times it's just not enough rotary wing, even in a big organization, to have all the aircraft out that you want to have out. So we were able to do Hurricane Maria from here when I was here before, which was in the state of Puerto Rico. We established the initial response, because the National Guard was wiped out. People couldn't even get out of their houses. They're able to send down units, did such a great job working with FEMA and all the Title 10 and all of the interagency that went down there, Health and Human Services. I talk a lot about the Coast Guard and how much they do in response day to day, but to make a disaster kind of turn around and start to a recovery effort, it takes that big team effort that does that. So, from hurricanes to deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, I was so fortunate to work with an Afghan brigade that I've worked detention. So we worked side by side together in the detention cells. And as people went through the process, we held them. And then when they went to the judge, and when they went before the judge, if they got sentenced, they went to the Afghan side. But when we held them both together, we were working with the Afghan army right there side by side. All of that's not possible without everybody working together as a team, which is what I would say is just consistent throughout my career. If I think of, I've gone through writing down now, they tell you at some point when you go to a pre-command course, draw a line, see where you are in your career as you're near the end of it. Start writing down, who are the important people and what was it you learned from almost every experience that you had, because you're kind of at the end of that and you need to start sharing, because pretty soon you'll be off that page and you'll be off to something else, and there's people coming up behind you that need to pick up as much as they can from you, and you're gonna hand off to them eventually, and they'll be the leaders of tomorrow. That's always the hope, is maybe you give someone one little thing they can put in their kit bag and it helps them in a future environment. Yeah, it starts from set the boat, everybody working as a team, and bring that throughout any situation that you find yourself in.
And as the last question on this show, I like to ask my guests to give an advice for the listeners, whether they are young, older, in the military or in the civilian side. Maybe you have some lessons to share or some advice or just some final word that you want to put out.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate that. I would say don't tell yourself no. Believe in yourself and really work, and people will see what you're doing and they'll see your talent and doors will open. If you tell yourself no, that door's never going to open. You're the one stopping yourself. See what you can do and just believe in yourself, and other people will believe in you too, and they'll see that and they'll see that you're one of those people setting the boat, rowing with the team, and you'll be able to accomplish so much in your careers, whether that's in the military, in tech like you, Danny, or in any of our careers, our first responders, all of our medical people. If you believe in yourself, don't tell yourself no. In this country, you can do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming over and for sharing all of the lessons, stories. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you are doing for this country. And yeah, very glad to have had this conversation with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you do a podcast and you say, I'm gonna interview people from all walks of life and see what I can learn from that. It's a wonderful idea, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.